Okay, today we are going to explore the prayer principle, and I'm calling it back to basics because that's what it is. When you talk about a subject like prayer, you can talk about it from many different perspectives, but there's a basic idea that when we think about it, we always go back to the same principles that we employ. And I have always appreciated Unity's approach to it, that's calling it a twofold process of denial and affirmation. And you're familiar with that, and we'll talk about it, but it is back to basics. So we've all heard this statement, prayer does not change God, it changes us. And that goes back to, I think, a medieval philosopher, or maybe a little bit later than that. I can't ever pronounce the guy's name, so I'm not even going to try. But I was reading an article when I was looking for this passage, for this statement, and the person that wrote the article about it said he didn't like it. Didn't like the idea of God not changing. He wants to make sure that when he prays, God hears him and does something about it. So I thought that was kind of a funny perspective, but I always liked this statement. Prayer does not change God, it changes us. This seems to agree with the statement of James, who referred to God as the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. If we accept this, then we want to know how we are to change if our prayer is to be effective. The reason I like that is because it puts the ball in our court. That was always the problem. When you pray to the God that you're trying to change, you never know if you get through, for sure, until you see the answer. But if you are focused on your own attitude, on yourself, where your mind is, what you're doing mentally and emotionally, then you know that you are either in the groove or you're out. You know, if you pray about something and then you continue to worry about it, isn't that a form of prayer? You know, you're denying and affirming something, but it's in a negative sense. So you can at least monitor yourself to see where you are. You know, are you truly releasing the energy around the negative appearance? Is something changing in you? Because what we assume is this creative life force is always flowing through us, and we're somehow influencing it. And we do that through attitude. We do that through our thinking, our feeling, our expectation, and all that. So you always know the ball's in your court when you look at it this way. It doesn't change God. Prayer doesn't change God. It changes us, and I've said that a million times, that the meaning of prayer from an Aramaic point of view is the word is slotha, that means to make an adjustment. We're not praying to adjust God. We're praying to adjust ourselves. And so the bottom line there is the ball is always in our court. And I know when I'm praying about something, if I'm uneasy about it, that's a sign to me that something in me needs to change. And that's not to say that I'm failing. It's not to say anything but the acknowledging that something in me needs to change. The adjustment needs to occur in me. And that's not always easy to do, but I would guarantee that it's easier than changing God. Because you always have something to say about it. You know, you always... and again, it changes the way we think of God if we think of it this way. If God is this creative life force that is flowing through us like a river, that is not saying, you know, I think you're good or I think you're bad, it just is, and you are imprinting on that force, on that flow. It's like the illustration I've used before, you're pouring a colored dye into the stream, and it's coming out in the reservoir a certain color. And that is coming from us. And so we can change that color. You know, that's the whole point. Or we can stop pouring the dye in altogether. and just have the pure life expression. And I'll say here another thing. How many of you remember that Jesus had brothers and sisters? You've all read that in the Gospels. That traditionally it was believed that the letter of James was written by the brother of Jesus. But I think most scholars now do not believe that's possible, because they say it's written in a pretty sophisticated form of Greek. This is just kind of a side note. And that James, the brother of Jesus, probably would not have known Greek, would not have known how to write at that level, if at all. Probably not at all, is sort of the consensus. But here is a fact that a lot of us don't know, or a lot of people don't know, is the church in Jerusalem that immediately followed the death of Jesus was run by James, the brother of Jesus. And that is a known fact. That is a historical truth. People know that. And he had another brother that was involved also. And when you just think about that, those simple ideas, it kind of throws a whole new light on the whole Jesus thing. So you have Jesus, and branching off after his death, branching off of him, you have the church that was started in Jerusalem. And by church, we don't know exactly what that means. Was it a group of people meeting in a household? What was it exactly? We would probably imagine from our normal Bible school training that there would be hundreds of thousands of people, in the church, but there probably wasn't. And they were probably all Jews. James, of course, was a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. So that church would promote the Jewish customs. There was a fight going on in the early church between Paul and people like James. And people like James said, you have to be circumcised, you have to practice kosher eating, you have to eat as prescribed in the Old Testament. You have to follow these rules. Paul comes along and says you don't have to follow these rules. Jesus fulfilled the rules, so we no longer have to do that. But they had a meeting at some point, and they kind of resolved that, where James and the church agreed to let Paul address the Gentiles, and the Gentiles did not have to they did not have to become a Jew first before they became a Christian. And the Paul church won the fight, and that's what we are today. That's what the Christian movement is today. It's the result of Paul winning that argument, because Christians today don't have to follow Jewish law. In fact, it totally abolished it, abandoned it. And Paul said that as well, that we don't need to do this anymore. It's not required. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a tidbit. So when you hear James, and there were several Jameses, in the New Testament, but the brother of Jesus is specified. So just keep that in mind. This was a family. It was a family involved in this movement. And Mary, the mother, probably was involved there as well. But it just kind of throws another light on the whole thing. We see Jesus as this lone figure, but he had a family, he had a support system. And there's a lot of, scholars have some very interesting ideas about him. There are some very well-noted scholars that think James wrote the letter of James. So it's kind of a debate. And I am not a scholar. I don't know how to do Greek. I don't know any of that stuff, so I have to kind of depend on them. But the argument to me is it was probably a little more sophisticated than the actual James, the brother of Jesus, would have been able to pull off. So just a side note there. So in Matthew 5:37, Jesus emphasized the importance of simplicity in our words by saying, "Let what you say be simply yes or no." This principle holds true with prayer. saying yes affirms a truth, while saying no denotes denial. And you know what we mean by denial. We don't mean to stick our heads in the sand. We don't need to mean to pretend like the problem is not there. Denial is releasing the negative energy we're pouring into an appearance. And you know that you've succeeded when you no longer feel negative. It's a pretty simple test. That when you truly release that negative perception you have, you've experienced denial. So how would this play out? You have a problem that pops up in your life, you react to it negatively. It looks like it's bigger than you are. So you have this negative reaction. You don't know how to solve it. And, the old approach would be pray to get God to change something for us. I don't know how to do this, so God, please help me. Well, what we would do, and denial actually would be the first thing we would do, not affirmation. Jesus said yes first and no second, but I would reverse that, because the biggest enemy that we all have when we're confronted with an appearance of negativity is a negative reaction. And that negative reaction can cause you to make all kinds of decisions that won't necessarily be for your highest good. So I think, and I think Unity overall says this too, that the denial is the first thing, the releasing of the negative energy to the best we can. Our typical approach to that is, well, when the problem is solved, I will release the negative energy. But prayer is to make an adjustment here. So we are saying that let's do that first. And it's not as hard as we might think it is. At times I found it helpful. I don't do this all the time, but if I write down something, write down the problem, and then just kind of write a statement of denial, a statement of release. I now release this negative reaction I'm having, and kind of name that. You can call it whatever you want, but just acknowledge it. And to actually feel yourself letting it go and saying to yourself, I don't know how this will be resolved, I just know it will be. That's the affirmation, the knowing that it will be. And I think I said in my prayer book back in 1990 when I wrote that the affirmation is natural. When you release the negative energy, the affirmation is the response. It's the rising, it's the natural. I know everything's working out. I know everything's going to be okay. How? I don't know, but I just know it is. And so it's the holding of truth. The truth is, we've survived everything so far. We've made it this far. So we've come through a lot of negativity. We've come through a lot of negative appearances. And we're here today. So we could have a whole new problem, this afternoon and have to start over with that, but we'll make it through that as well. That's part of the affirmation, is remembering that you'll be fine. You'll get through this. You'll make it. You'll get through this. That a power greater than yourself is working, and that's absolutely true. That's that creative life force is working through us at all times. And what's it doing? It's inspiring us. It's giving us new insight. It's giving us faith. It's giving us all the things we need to bring ourselves into alignment with what it is we want to experience. And that is freedom from this appearance. In our prayer, we acknowledge the truth and release any negative energy we may have attached to a certain situation. And the truth always, what we can always come back to is, I'm an expression of the infinite. I'm an expression of God. Is there anything that can pull God down? If I'm an expression of that, I relate to that. I say I'm one with that. And that's a very powerful affirmation. And to, again, make that shift in our thinking where I feel some aspect of that truth. It is absolutely true that I am an expression of God. Nothing stops God. Therefore, nothing stops me. and I'm open and receptive to how the path opens up. Fear, as the most prevalent form of negative energy, often requires our attention and release during prayer. And this may be true that we would focus more on releasing than on the affirmation. That, again, that fear is a pretty big deal for all of us. We're all influenced by it. And we often make decisions based on fear that are not for our highest good. And the appearance always tells us this is very real. You must be very afraid and react in a very fearful way. It doesn't say that in that plain English. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. We react to things through fear. It's very common. It's the most common problem that I think we face in this life is fear. It's fear of not being able to get through, not being able to handle something. And it's, again, we've just become so accustomed to it that one thing the near-death experiencers say is they lose all fear, absolutely all fear. Well, what do you have to be afraid of if you don't have a body? You're pretty safe, because that's another way to think about it. The whole fear-based consciousness is body-based. It's based on the body. Well, we have a body. So that's why it seems so natural to us to conjure up fear. If a bear shows up, you have a certain amount of fear, but we're not talking about bears. The kinds of bears I would talk about are the ones that hide under your bed. I think I've had more trouble with them than I've had with actual bears. I've only encountered one or two bears in my life. One was in our yard in Evergreen. He was pretty feisty, but I went in the house and he left us alone. The other was on a motorcycle. Beth and I were riding through the mesa or somewhere. I don't know where it was, but saw this bear, and I decided to turn the motorcycle around and go back and get a picture of him. Well, the motorcycle did this, and I made too sharp a turn and fell over. So the motorcycle was more dangerous than the bear. I don't have nightmares about motorcycles under my bed, but I've had a great deal of problems with bears under my bed, in my life, as a kid especially. And with two brothers that knew how to make that bear seem pretty real. Plus my dad, he would sing his bedtime songs with his guitar, and they were usually about bears that were attacking us. So we would go to sleep, with that thought. So if you hear creaks and cracks in your house and you have this belief system that a bear could be there, and it wasn't until I was about 40 that I started rationally thinking about how impossible it would be for a bear to get under my bed, especially when there weren't any even around, where I grew up. But I've had more trouble with imaginary bears than I have with real ones. That's the bottom line, and that's probably true with all of us. The bear under the bed comes in many different forms. But, disease triggers a lot of things. We read about things. If you ever have symptoms and you go online and see what those are, you are sure you're going to die in 15 minutes, if you don't get to the emergency room. It's just like, I went to the doctor one time with a story like that, and he said, "You've been on the internet, right?" He said, "All you have is a sore throat," basically. So he was right. That internet can be a big bear under the bed, because, it's got a lot of good stuff. I used it this week for something else I'll tell you here in a minute. So the way we perceive things and think about them affects how we engage with the creative life force that we refer to God. So we're afraid of this bear under the bed, whatever form that takes. What has that got to do with God? What would that have to do with changing God, getting God to somehow change? We've got this bear under our bed, and we pray to God to get rid of it. So how would God change that when it's going on in our thinking, when it's going on in our consciousness? So that's where denial comes in. That's where we take the ball and we run with it. We say, I will not respond to this situation. And we can do like I did when I was 40 and rationally figure out why a bear could not possibly be under my bed. I couldn't even fit under my bed. And the bear that was under there was a lot bigger than me, I was sure. But it makes no sense. So we can take almost anything like this and we can reduce that fear, that energy of fear, we can let it go. And that's a very powerful thing to do. So the way we perceive things and think about them affects how we engage with the creative life force that we refer to as God. So you think about that, it's where does that problem come from? And that's it comes from me, so I can do something about it. That's the good news. When we seek healing through prayer, we begin by acknowledging that deep down our soul is already complete. We embrace our inherent wholeness and reject any conflicting appearances. Rejecting these appearances does not imply that we deny or disregard them. So I think the healing of pain is one of the most difficult things to deal with when you're physically in pain and you're trying to say, well, my soul is okay, but my body sure doesn't feel so good. That's a very difficult thing to deal with. So in a case like that, we have to look past it even though the pain is there. We have to acknowledge, I am not this body. This body, it does hurt, right now. It's having a problem at the moment. But I am a spiritual being. And so we're not going to try to cast off this thing is not real. We're going to focus on the soul as a complete light that is shining through this body right now. And what we're doing by doing that is we're opening avenues that we don't even understand, maybe on the molecular level or some deeper level physically even, because our thinking does affect our body. You can make yourself physically ill through worry. People think I've worried myself to death because I have white hair. My grandmother had white hair ever since I knew her, so I'm sure I got it from her. I don't worry that much. But the body, we know, can affect you. You can increase your heart rate, your breathing. You can break into a sweat by thinking, being afraid of something. So the body does respond. So if you think of it that way, when you are experiencing an illness of some kind and you mentally and emotionally grasp the best you can this idea that my soul is whole, it is complete now, and it is a light shining out through this body. Relax your body and focus on the area of the pain, particularly see the light shining through this pain, this area. And just visualize that. Don't try to make anything happen. Just visualize that and hold that idea. What you're doing is you are affirming. That's the affirmation. You're affirming, I am whole, I am complete now. And seeing that wholeness and completeness shine through the body, that is a very powerful affirmation. Rather, it signifies that we let go of any uncertainty surrounding our healing, and instead we fully trust that it is already manifesting. There are no barriers or hindrances. This is one thing I said in my book, The Complete Soul. There are no natural barriers to the expression of the soul. No natural barriers. There are barriers, but not natural. And what we mean by that is that the barriers are the bears under the bed. It's the perceptions. So when you say there are no natural barriers to my healing, you are cleansing your mind, you're making an adjustment, you are praying, accepting your wholeness. Whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it. I think that's exactly why Jesus said to do that, is to see that wholeness, because it is a pathway. It opens up the pathway through the body. The body begins to respond. And if you don't feel that response, if you don't see that response, don't be discouraged by that. Just stay with it and hold that idea, hold that thought. Just like a river, God's energy flows in a single direction from within ourselves outward. The same principle applies to any other need that we have. So that's why I like that analogy of the river. It flows in one direction. If you think of God, the creative life force, it flows in one direction from the inside out. So that means let's get the inside right. Let's get that in harmony with what is true at the deepest and highest level. And as we do that, we open these avenues, again, avenues we don't even know are closed. But we open ourselves to this higher activity that is at work right now. As I've said before, if you step out of your body right now, you will experience absolute completeness, absolute wholeness, absolute bliss, absolute freedom. So that does not come about the moment you step out of your body. It's already there. And that's what we want to focus on. I'm already whole and complete. And so this body, this garment that I have, maybe I need to throw it in the washing machine once in a while to get things back in order. But the soul is already complete. So what do we usually say when we have something going on? We say, I have a cold. I said that. I've said that many times. But is that true? Can I, the soul that I am, ever have a cold? My body can. But we are so accustomed to saying, I'm my body. This is me. So I have this cold. In Unity, we say, we call the cold a cleansing. And that's kind of a nice way to think of what it is, because it really is. Your body's rejecting something. It's coming out. So we can think of it that way. It doesn't mean you're going to use fewer tissues or drink less alcohol or whatever. But it means that this cleansing is occurring. It's a new shift of perception. Instead of this thing being so negative, it's a natural thing. You know, it's a natural part of the healing process, and that cleansing is making way for the expression of the soul. The soul is always whole. If we can hold that idea, and it doesn't just apply to healing, it doesn't just apply to the body, it applies to everything. Finances it applies to, because when you don't have a body, you have no need for money, because you don't have to eat, you don't have to have a house, you don't have to have clothing, you don't have to have anything. No money. So that means you're already supplied. Your supply is already there. It doesn't mean we shove away the whole money thing. In the body, we have money. In the body, we have financial challenges. So it's not something that we just ignore or something we try to get around. It is the same principle that the wholeness that I am, that is, my needs are met at the soul level. I don't even have any needs. That is expressing through every aspect of my body and my financial life, every aspect of my affairs. If we hold that thought, that's the beginning of our prayer. We're releasing the appearance. Yes, this appearance is here, but I will not give it the energy I have been giving it. I will see it as a way for, the divine to express itself in this situation. So prayer is practical. Whenever we notice any sign of lack, we take it as a reminder to embrace the power of prayer. As we live in a physical form, our prayer practice might also require us to make adjustments in areas such as our diet or overall lifestyle. Just this week, I noticed my car was leaking oil. That nice, pretty new blue Jeep out there. My prayer for healing involved taking it to a mechanic. My first step was to crawl underneath it and see if I could find what was coming out where, and maybe tighten a screw or two, which I did. but it kept going. So as much as I would like to make such an issue to self-heal, as much as I would like such an issue to self-heal, such things usually involve participation at the physical level. So we're not saying let's not do something. You know, I could sit there and visualize my Jeep, that oil just stopping, you know, and not dripping out anymore. Well, I didn't know how I was going to get it down to the mechanic, and Pam Kellerstrass manifested as my taxi that day. So that's things have a way of working out. But we still have to take action, and that is the action in the physical sense is the prayer. It's connected with knowing this will come to pass, this will stop, we'll fix this thing, and stop thinking, how is it going to be done? But just take it to the mechanic. So sometimes we do need to go to the doctor, and he needs to say, stop surfing the internet. Go home and go to bed. You know, that sometimes of just a few words from a doctor. I told you the story several times about the time I had the throat cancer, I thought. And he looks in my throat with a wooden stick and says it's just an allergy. And the pain I was having went away that day, just almost immediately. And I had worried about that probably for 6 months because I thought, you know, this is bad. So that was a bear under my bed, a big one. And it was pretty close to home, closer than my bed. But, and it's not to say those things don't happen. You know, they do, because one of the things that triggered my fear was a custodian I had did develop throat cancer and went through the whole thing, eventually died from it. So I was watching this while I was feeling this bear under the bed pain, and I was making a bigger problem out of it than need be. But that's the power of the mind. What did I create in reality? I didn't create anything except misery for myself. And so that's where prayer comes in. Let's sideline the misery side of it as much as we can. If we think of the prayer principle as the act of putting everything in motion, beginning with our state of mind, then we're open to the perfect outworking of our need at all levels. And by putting everything in motion, I'm saying, first of all, get it straight in your mind. This too shall pass. And then call the mechanic, you know, if you need to, or do whatever step is required that you need to take. Go to the support group. You know, do something that helps you get away from yourself, get out of your negative, destructive thinking, get around people that will support you, or read something that'll support you. Do something that'll change your bear under the bed mentality until you know that bear is not there. And then you'll walk through it. And it will take physical, it will take spiritual, it will take mental, it will take emotional energy. All of these things working together, that's putting everything in motion. That's really what prayer is. That's the prayer principle. Okay? Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.